Mike Owens here, joined today by Dan Hardy, a UK MMA legend and now head of fighter operations over at PFL Europe. Dan, always a pleasure, my man. How are things for you today?
Always a pleasure, my friend. Yes, things are good today. Things are good. We're getting ready for Paris Fight Week, so I'm trying to get a little bit of rest these days because I know there's going to be none next week.
100%. Well, in terms of the PFL inaugural European League, we're two down and two to go with Paris and Dublin upcoming. With two shows now in the books, what has the season lived up to your expectations? Has it exceeded or perhaps exceeded, or where are we at in terms of your overall expectations of the season?
I think we've identified some real superstars. I kind of didn't know what to expect. I knew when we looked at the roster, I thought to myself, there's going to be some really, really competitive fights in here, but not to the level that they have been, and not to the level of excitement that I have now going into these playoffs. March seems like such a long time ago now, but you look at the performances that we had. Dakota and Simeon both showed a different facet to their game. We had a lovely body shot knockout, head kick knockout. It was a bit of a wild night. And I think, moving into the Berlin event, there was some real anticipation at how these two brackets were going to play out, because for me, they were the two most competitive. Bantamweight and lightweight, especially the bantamweights. We have fighters on the roster there that could be world champions in any organization. So the unpredictability of the results was something I was anxious and excited for, and I am for Paris next week because again I really couldn't pick winners out of them. You've got Nutsi against Malambo and you've got Kakarov against Taleb in bantamweights. Like, pick them apart. Like who wins that? You know what I mean? And then of course the main event, Cedric Doumbe and Jordan Zebo. I feel like we started off at quite a small event that went really, really well, and we had some really great performances. I feel like we leveled up in Berlin and kind of arrived as a good European level event and had really good fights. And now I feel like Paris is going to be a new level again. Like, it's almost like we've become 4 different promotions this year before the year's out. By the time Dublin comes around, it's going to feel like any other massive event in Dublin.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned it's the main event there, Cedric Doumbe obviously making his PFL debut. You've touched a little bit on it, but I just kind of want to get your specific thoughts on how powerful you think Doumbe's presence is on this card, because as you mentioned, we've got the tournament style. That's obviously the focus of the card in many ways, but having that superstar Doumbe making his PFL debut is obviously going to be a big thing for PFL Europe.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been surprised, honestly, about the star power of Doumbe myself. I followed his kickboxing career. I've been a fan for many, many years. But when he stepped over into mixed martial arts, even though he was fighting on small regional events and the opponents were unknown, there was a lot of attention. Like, it's almost like, you got to think, what is he? 31 years old. He was 75 and 7 in kickboxing. Like, you look at someone and you think to yourself, well, he's already achieved so much. If he was 31 years old and 4-0 in MMA, we'd be excited. But the fact that he's already a legendary kickboxer, like, it's like he's starting a new career and everyone wants to be on board before it starts to really gather momentum. And the best thing about this is that, he's fighting on home soil. He's in the main event. He's taking on someone else who's undefeated, has got the same record as him. They genuinely really don't like one another. There's real rivalry between the two camps. They don't want to be around one another fight week. We're bringing in additional security just to make sure it's going to be a fiery event, that is. And Doumbe loves the trash talking as well, which means that he's going to hype this up as much as he can. And then, the French MMA fans are going to get to see him potentially fight for the last time in France for a long while. Because if he moves over onto the global roster, he's going to be, on the US shows next year fighting amongst the world's best welterweights. So it's a huge opportunity for people to see him live and see what he's capable of in MMA at this early stage.
I also think as well the success that Alex Pereira's had moving over to MMA is obviously going to pay dividends in terms of Doumbe, the attraction to Doumbe, because people can draw the comparisons there. You mentioned it there as well about moving over to the potential American shows. Where do you think in 2024 Doumbe, what space do you think he occupies in PFL? Do you think he goes into the standard tournament? Do you think he joins the pay-per-view league alongside Francis Ngannou? What space do you think he's going to operate for PFL?
I think in his mind, certainly, I think he's thinking regular season global. Like, he wants to be in amongst the welterweights because he looks at Sadabusi and the other guys in the division and knows that he's comparable competitively. Like I don't know whether he's going to get a rude awakening when he steps over onto that roster, or whether he's going to prove us all, prove himself right and beat everybody. Like if he steps onto the global roster next year and picks up the welterweight championship straight away, he's going to be under 10 fights undefeated, and he's going to be a pay-per-view star straight away. But we just don't know how his career is going to pan out. Like, he did pick up losses in kickboxing. There were only 5 of them, but they are losses. And sometimes you have to regroup and go again. Like, as excited as we all are, I'm also very aware that he's early in his career. And MMA is very, very unpredictable. You can get caught with things that you're not anticipating, no matter how good you are. And not, that's the thing. Like, there doesn't seem to be a great deal of forgiveness for him, to be honest. Like, everyone's expecting so much of him that it's like, well, where's he going to go? I'm open to the idea of him not being successful in Paris, and we match him again in Europe, because Jordan Zebo is a real tough test. Like, it's one of the reasons why this fight was matched. Like, we didn't want someone that was going to roll over for Doumbe, because it's not entertaining for anybody, including him. Like, if he's calling out Sadibou now, then we need to get him legitimate opponents that are going to test parts of his game that he's going to...
One of the kind of success stories, if you will, of the early stages of this season was the feel-good factor in terms of hearing about Simeon Powell being able to quit his full-time job to focus fully on MMA.
And I'm not saying that a bit of struggle is not a bad thing in your career, because it is. The struggle makes you question whether you want it. And sometimes if you keep reaffirming that question in your own head, you realize how hard you're chasing something, and that can be motivating in itself. But at the same time, like, what you don't want is people to be waking up and getting a session at 6 o'clock in the morning, add something more to their person that day. It's just not ideal at this level of competition. And with both of these fighters being undefeated, like, they need to do themselves justice by being fully committed to what they're trying to achieve. The fact that the money's in the sport so we can look after them now and give them that financial security it's an awesome thing for me to be a part of. But the goal is for me to be able to do that for everybody across the PFL rosters, so they can all be fully dedicated athletes. I mean, that's the end goal ultimately, isn't it? For everyone to be full-time. But they're at a stage in their career where they can and they have. But there are other fighters that are not too far off from that. Younger fighters further down the card. Chanel Dyer making her PFL debut, for example. Like, it's not going to be long before she's got that financial stability as well. And her as a full-time athlete is a scary thought. She's lethal already.
Yeah, 100%. I guess the next question I want to ask is kind of what happens post PFL Europe for the winners, because 2 of the 4 tournament brackets, the weight divisions in terms of women's flyweight and bantamweight, aren't currently appearing on the PFL world stage. So is there a progression plan for the likes of Dakota, or potentially the women's flyweight winner and also the bantamweight winner, in terms of what happens next?
Yeah, honestly, it's less of a case of where they're going to go and more a case of, like, what's the best choice for them. Like, with the growth of PFL Europe, with the growth of the global, the global roster, we've got regions opened up around the world as well, where we're going to be recruiting more talent as well. And, it might make sense sometimes to take a fighter into a different region and make them the main or co-main, kind of like what we've done with Cedric and the Lazy King. Her future's bright. Honestly, it doesn't really matter where she goes. She's going to be a part of the PFL. If she goes over onto the global roster and there's not a regular season weight class for her, then she'll be in feature bouts, I would imagine. There's a lot of things up in the air at the moment, as you can imagine. There's events on the rise and events falling apart, and lots of things shifting in the industry at the moment. So we're kind of holding off on any of the major decisions right now. But with Europe and global and the pay-per-view formats, we'll find plenty of work for these fighters.
I'm sure you will. And you mentioned the pay-per-view format there. I obviously want to talk about. I want to bring you back to a quote that you said to me 6 months ago in the PFL Newcastle media room. You said that we'll have Francis Ngannou in no time. And in no time, you had Francis Ngannou, which is a little bit of a strange one. Maybe you knew something at that time that I perhaps never. But your ultimate reaction, I haven't had the chance to speak to you, so your ultimate reaction on Francis Ngannou signing with the PFL and all the news.
I mean, well, you could see how excited I was just the speculating the fact that we might have him soon. Like, I mean, he's what a force in mixed martial arts. A scary individual, the heavyweight champ of the world, left the UFC on his own terms, gave him the belt back, went into free agency, said he was going to fight in boxing. He's done that. He's fighting Tyson Fury coming up. You know, I mean, like, what can he not do? You know, he's head of PFL Africa. We're going to be developing talent on the African continent and bringing that to the world very soon. And Ngannou is going to be integral in that. It's an amazing move that he's made, and a very courageous one. And I'm glad, first of all, that it's paid off for him and that it will continue to pay off for him. But the legacy will be far longer lasting, I think. You know, him moving over onto the PFL roster and putting that $2 million paycheck on, you know, on his opponent's purse. I mean, he negotiated that for his opponent, not knowing who that's going to be. Like, that's a man that wants to make peace with punching someone in the head as hard as he can. That's what that says to me. Like, I'll pay you $2 million, and I'm going to punch you in the head as hard as I can. That's a scary thought. And I think we're going to see a lot of heavyweights either fighting their way into free agency or not signing a long-term contract with anybody because of that opportunity on the table.
Yeah, 100%. Well, we obviously have the Tyson Fury fight you alluded to. It's taking place in, I believe, just over a month's time. I want to get your thoughts on it. And obviously, I know that from a kind of MMA combat purist angle, the logical pick is obviously Tyson Fury for a lot of people. So I guess how I want to frame this question is the Tyson Fury Francis Ngannou fight, is it less about result and more about occasion, more about changing the sport, if you will?
That's a good question. Is it more about the occasion? Yeah, I mean, potentially it is. Potentially it is. It's more about the entertainment aspect of it. I mean, of course, you know, Saudi Arabia are going to do incredible things with this event. There's going to be no expense spared, from what I can understand. And I think that the spectacle of the event in itself is going to be quite something to behold. But then at the top of it, you have, you know, the best heavyweight MMA fighter in the world against the best heavyweight boxer in the world, and they're going to genuinely try and hurt one another. It's just that for me is, you know, that's fascinating. Like the difference between this and anything else is that these are heavyweights, and Francis Ngannou is a wrecking ball of a human being. Like, we're not watching this because we're wondering how competitive it's going to be, right? Ultimately, we know that Tyson Fury is the better boxer. There's just we don't need to quantify that in any way. The chances of Ngannou winning are very, very slim. But the reason that we'll all tune in is because of that what if, right? It's because of that. Like, what if he does land? What if he manages to clip Tyson Fury and Fury goes down and he doesn't get up?
Yeah.
People wouldn't be able to have peace if they weren't watching that live when it happened. Like, everyone's going to show up the next day at work. Oh my God, did you see that? I'm like, oh no, I watched it on the highlights afterwards. You don't want to be that person. Like, that's why we're tuning in, because you want to be there for the what if in the moment. And there's never more of a what if in a heavyweight fight.
Yeah, 100%. Let's turn the conversation back to Paris just for one final question, Dan. I guess, as I mentioned, we've 2 shows down, we've got 2 to go. So PFL Europe has, to a certain extent, found its footing. I think it's fair to say, as you alluded to, with the growth. What are your main hopes that you want to get out of Paris? Is there a particular person you want to see impress? Is there someone a particular moment you want to see? What is the kind of key hope or the key goal to get out of PFL Paris?
The most important thing, the overriding important thing for me is the atmosphere in the arena, right? Like, we've seen it 2 events recently. The UFC had an incredible event there. We had Glory recently as well, Glory Kickboxing. That was a great event. Unfortunately, they lost the main event, but even so, the event was really, really good. The atmosphere was great in there. And I think that because MMA it's been illegal in France for so long, it's recently become allowed. These events, when they arrive in Paris, they go all out and they stack the cards to really celebrate. Like, I just want a great atmosphere in there. I want people there from the first fight to celebrate all the fighters on the card. I want them to make loads of noise for the French fighters that we've got. I want them to be, impressed and appreciative of the fighters we've got from other regions that are there to perform for them. And ultimately to realize that the level of talent that we've got on that card. You know, I've been playing about with the order of the card based on different regions and different broadcasters and stuff. And honestly, I could switch it around 100 times and not do it justice. It's like, you just don't want to be there to miss any of the fights. So really, I would like a busy arena from the opening bell.
I love it. I love it. Dan, it's truly always a pleasure to get your time. Thank you. Congratulations on your initial success at PFL Europe. I look forward to watching the event in Paris and hopefully seeing you in Dublin in December.
Yes, absolutely. I'd be disappointed if you weren't there, my friend. It'd be good to see you.